Street Fighter 6's release date is approaching swiftly, and with it, the inevitable loss of hair and the hot fire's primal fury induced by the drive impact mechanic. You may be in the minority of people who really enjoy that particular mechanic during the betas. For the rest of us, who don't enjoy highly damaging jump scares with the mental stack of a whale, it might be best to consider the mechanic and its implication on gameplay, so we can shift our perspective from cheap OP BS, I hate this game, to alright, this makes sense, I need to switch up my gameplay a bit. Notable exception being the corner. For that, I can only recommend choosing a benevolent deity and praying your little heart out. In neutral, however, the game goes from rock paper scissors to rock paper scissors scissors poke. Sort of. Now, I'm not an amazing player, so if I forget something or I'm playing wrong about something, please inform me, as I'd like to be as mentally prepared for Street Fighter 6 when it drops as I can be. That said, there are a number of things people usually do in neutral, and we need to consider how those things interact with drive impact, so we can better understand when we should be thinking about drive impact and when there's no point. The list goes as follows: buffers, cancelable pokes, non-cancelable pokes, cancels, special moves, most notably projectiles, jumps, and dashes and drive rush. I'll lump those two together. There is, of course, whiff punishing as well, but if someone whiffs and the other person whiff punishes, drive impact cannot possibly sneak into the equation, so we don't care about that. The short of my assessment of those tools relative to drive impact in neutral is as follows: buffers lose to drive impact, cancelable pokes beat it, non-cancelable pokes lose to it, cancels lose to it, special moves lose to it, jumps, dashes and drive rush beat it. The long for each option is the following: buffer is when you press a button in neutral that whiffs and you input a special move while your button is happening, so that if your opponent walks into it or does something that extends their hitbox, such as press a button like throw or jab or whatever, you hit them and you get the special cancel, ideally into a combo. An example for that would be if you were to press standing heavy punch as Ryu and buffer EX dunk kick, or if you've set up a spacing trap, you'd probably use a buffer there as well. Now, I'm not saying this is a good thing to do in a game where whiff punishes are expected to be a big part of the game, but it's still an option. Perhaps standing light kick into Tatsu might be a better example. Whatever the case, if your opponent does drive impact, your special move comes out, it hits the drive impact armor, and you get hit into a full combo. Meaning, if your opponent hits you with a lot of drive impact, perhaps consider not using buffers until you counter drive impact them enough to make them stop. Editor here. I recently realized something very obvious that I should add to buffers. If you buffer your button into drive rush or into level 1 super, which remember won't come out unless they walk into your button, in which case they get hit anyway, then you actually beat drive impact. I think that is going to be very important going forward for playing neutral in Street Fighter 6. This is where cancelable pokes enter the ring. If you press the same standing heavy punch or standing light kick as Ryu, such that it would hit your opponent, and you don't cancel that button into anything, if your opponent does a random drive impact at that time, you can cancel your button into drive impact and clap some cheeks. Simple as that. Except not really. How come? Well, you may have heard that hit confirms are made to be practically impossible for human reaction time in Street Fighter 6, which means if your opponent does a drive impact before your cancelable poke connects, chances are you have enough time to cancel, as shown here. If, however, your opponent uses their drive impact at about the same time your cancelable poke hits them, you have about your cancel window in time to react with your own drive impact, as shown here. Which, as we mentioned, was not made to be a reactable time window, so you get hit. Keep that in mind. It will happen as you play, and if you understand the interaction, it's likely to result in less negative emotional and spiritual damage being inflicted upon you, even if you did get smashed pretty hard. Non-cancelable pokes tend to be really good, and the trade-off for that is you can't get anything meaningful out of, such as good damage because you can't cancel them into a special, no pressure as they're usually not plus on block, and no Oki except for sweeps and the likes, but they are punishable on block. Obviously, if you swing with one of those buttons and your opponent mashes on drive impact, you're getting smoked, and you should consider not using non-cancelable buttons until you've got your opponent to ease up on the drive impact. Cancels. What do I mean by that? I'll give you one simple example. Ryu's crouching medium kick into Fireball. A sequence as old as time. There is no hit confirming, there's nothing fancy to it. Other characters might do, say, button into Rekka for Jamie, button into Stock for Jury. You get the idea. This also clearly loses to Drive Impact. It will absorb your button and your special and smash your face in. Again, be mindful when doing cancels like that against Drive Impact happy opponents, and also pay attention to cancel happy opponents, as it might be useful to bust out the Drive Impact yourself and give them something to think about. Special moves are pretty much the same thing when it comes to random Drive Impacts in you do a Hadouken, you don't recover in time to counter Drive Impact unless your opponent was really swinging for the fences from far away. You do a Stalker's Jury, you're toast. Blankables, Honda Headbutt, etc. those all lose to Drive Impact. Again, consider your options based on your opponent's habits and make peace with the fact you're going to get randomed out and robbed every now and then. It's fighting game. People love taking risks. It's going to happen. Jumps. Now, here's an interesting situation. If you try to essentially anti-air with Drive Impact, chances are what will happen is the Drive Impact will armor through the jump in button and the person jumping will press their own Drive Impact and you're getting comboed. Conclusion. Avoid using Drive Impact as an anti-air, even though technically if you hit it early enough and hit them in the air, it will work. If you don't, however, it hurts too much. Not recommend. Lastly, dashes and drive rush. Quick math shows us that Drive Impact takes more time to come out than dashes and drive rush, so unless the dash happens after the Drive Impact has already started, the person dashing will have enough time to counter Drive Impact. Drive rush can be cancelled into Drive Impact, so that one wins clean. Unless, of course, you do Drive Rush into Overhead immediately or some other non-cancelable button, in which case Drive Impact will win. So you still have to pay some attention to what you and your opponent are doing off of Drive Rush. I imagine Overhead is going to be quite popular choice, at least for a while, so it might be worth keeping that in mind. That's the overview. Now, what did they mean with that whole when to think and when not to think about Drive Impact thing? Well, if you do something that you know loses to Drive Impact, there is no need to waste memory banks on considering Drive Impact. For example, if I do crouching medium kick into Hadouken, I'm not thinking about Drive Impact. I can't do anything about it anyway, and I've decided on my option. It's pointless. If I press Ryu standing medium kick, trying to poke out a jump or some such, I'm not thinking about Drive Impact. On the other hand, if I do Ryu's crouching medium kick without cancelling, I gotta be ready for impact. Because guess what? Just because you're playing around it doesn't mean you can relax. Which is why I hate that mechanic. You still have to react to it. If I jump, I better be ready. If I dash, I better be ready. If I'm walking back and forth, like I know what I'm doing and this is footsies, I better be ready to react to the good old DI. A big part of fighting games, in my experience, is the mental stack. If you find a way to think about fewer options in as many situations as possible, and not think about certain options at all whenever possible, you do better and you'll be less stressed. A big part of happiness, in my experience, is perspective. That's why if you, like me, are quite unhappy with the existence of Drive Impact, you will benefit greatly from understanding where it works, where it doesn't, and why. That way, even when some random BS happens, you can push aside the initial emotional reaction and replace it with cold logic and quick adjustment plan going forward. Anyway, this video ended up longer than I expected. It's over now.